Okay, so I started recording, and I started back at localhost with the Winamp server running. That way, it's just easy to kind of get to.
Okay.
And that way, when I post a recording, you'll be able to find and go, oh yeah, that's what I'm doing. All right, so we've got the PHP MyAdmin, which is a tool here, and that takes us to our ability to create databases very simply using a web front-end interface.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so step one is we need to create the actual database. So
Yeah.
on my left-hand side, I've got an option for new, and this is going to take me to my list of database names, and I can say create a database here. I'm going to call this senior project. Of course, you can call it something else if you want. And I'm going to click create. Okay, and that just created my senior project down here. If you want to choose a different collation, you can, but I chose the Latin Swedish, which is the default.
Okay.
Okay. If you want to check privileges, this is if you have other users and whatnot. Right now you're working as root, and so you just get everything. So don't worry about that too much. All right. If you click on senior project, we don't have any tables at all right now. And so let me pull up your example. Okay, database outline. Let me pull this up. Awesome. Okay, so here we have our questions, our options, answers, and the comments. Okay, so let's go back to MySQL, and we're going to first pick up the questions. So we have questions, the number of columns. I can come here and say, okay, we got the primary key, we have a question, we have a paragraph title, and we have a descriptive text. So that's 4 columns I'll need to create. So number of columns, 4, then click go.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's going to give us a little kind of spreadsheet type of view of how we're going to make our columns. Okay, so the first is going to be our primary key. So this is going to be, since we're doing questions, it's going to be question ID. So type int, that's good. Don't need any of that. Attributes, I can choose unsigned if I want to. The odds of me needing so many questions I'm going to deal with unsigned, I ain't going to worry about. But I am going to check under index. I'm going to set this as my primary. This is how it's going to know. It's going to create as an index. It knows when it's a primary key that it has to be unique and all that type of stuff. So that gets set. And I'm going to set A underscore I, which is auto increment. That's a little checkbox. Okay.
Okay.
Next thing that I'm going to pick, and come back here, I'm going to do, this is just me. I like to do my title first. I like to try to think, how is this going to be displayed in order?
Yeah, I think that's will be a lot better because then it's gonna display in the pretty much same order, right? When you
Yeah,
transfer to
you
website.
know, you can reorder and recategorize these however you want.
Okay.
That's not a problem. I just, from a logical perspective, when I'm building my databases, I find it easier for me to think logically. Okay, what piece of data needs to go where? Um,
Mhm.
so I'm going to come over here and we'll do title. This is going to be a varchar. When I have a varchar, I need to give it a length. Um, your title's probably not going to be really long, but just to give it plenty of space, I'm going to set 255 characters.
Okay.
That should be more than enough. 255 characters winds up about 3 lines of text. If you figure 80 characters per line, that's a little bit over 3 lines of text. So it should be fine.
Yeah, it should be more than enough.
Yeah. The next is going to be the question. We'll do that as a
Or
var.
should we go with the descriptive text first, because it's gonna be the text first, then the questions, or does it matter?
I don't know if it's going to be that way or not. It might be a question and then a descriptive text explaining. I don't know. I mean, if you want, we can do the descriptive text if you'd like.
Because that's the order they send it me.
Okay, then let's do it that way. Since that might be what they're thinking. Okay, so I'm just going to call this descriptive.
Okay.
It's also going to be varchar, and I'm going to make this bigger because it's descriptive. I'll say 1024. That, if 255 is approximately 3 lines of text, 1024 is 12 lines of text, that's a decent sized paragraph. I don't think they're going to go over that. So you should be good there. And then we have the question itself, also varchar, and once again, we'll do 255 for that. It used to be varchars had a limit of 255 characters. That limit is now, I think, 2,000 characters or something like that. It's dependent upon the database. So you can get a lot bigger, which is nice.
So on the descriptive, instead of varchar, can I define it as text? Would it give me more flexibility?
It's not going to be a stability. It's going to be using a varchar is just a little bit easier than your text field. Your text field comes with some limitations, like in some cases you can't search within a text field in a SQL query. You can't sort upon it, that type of stuff. So
okay.
I prefer to use varchars over text anytime that I have a legitimate reason to, unless I know I'm going to be looking at huge amounts of text, I like to use varchar. That's just me. Especially if you're going to be looking at like 100 characters or less. I never use text for anything less than like 255 characters. Okay, so we got our first question. Now we're going to look at, I think we want to do an options table.
Yes.
Okay, so these are going to be these are going to be associated with the question. These are the options that they can pick.
Yes, that's what's it's going to be. I think they give 3 options per question.
3 options per question. Okay, so we're going to have a composite primary key. The composite primary key is going to be the answer ID and what? Or question ID?
Question ID, that's what I was thinking.
I'm sorry, say one more. You broke
up.
I
was thinking combine question ID and the options ID together.
Okay.
So it's like we can easily tie up all of them to question 1.
Yeah.
And
I think, and this is just me going off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that the primary, if we're going to have a key for the option, we don't really need a composite because we've got that options key. We will need a foreign key linking back to our question so we know what option goes with what question. But okay. I don't think we need it as a composite primary, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to need 3. Now there is one other thing. So we're going to use a primary key, a foreign key back to question, and then the option text that's going to display. Now, I don't think we're going to need to for the complexity and the amount of visitors that we're going to have. But just forward thinking, if you were dealing with like a really large application that was going to have thousands of people visiting a day, excuse me, thousands of people visiting a day, maybe even an hour, going through and counting all the how many times someone selected an option, that's kind of an expensive SQL command. But you could add a 4th field that was like a count in there, and then run a script that says, okay, every hour or every 10 minutes or however long you want to update it, it would go and update the count automatically. And so you
Okay.
only, instead of doing that expensive counting process maybe 5 or 10 times a minute, now you're doing it every 5 or 10 minutes or hour or something like that. So your data is never fully up to date,
Mm-hmm.
but you get a performance improvement because now you're just reading that field off of options. I
Okay.
think that's overkill for the size project this is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I just kind of want to point it out there, when you're out looking at bigger, more complex systems.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we do something like that before we create it? Like as you said,
Well, we can
the
put that.
count and everything.
Yeah, we can add that field.
Okay. What I was gonna ask is there like any option that it will update it as somebody answers, like one of the questions?
So yeah, and we can do that. That is an option, and that's just as an extra statement that you have to do on the back end when you run and process it. But yeah, you can do that.
That's okay. If it's not too complex, we can add that in that way. We don't have to update it frequently because I don't think we're gonna have that many visitors anyways.
Yeah. Okay. So in a case like this, once again we have our ID, or excuse me, this is going to be option ID. It's just an integer, primary index, and it auto increments. Then we have our question ID. This is going to be our foreign key, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I'm going to select this as an index. I don't want to select unique because unique, remember, has to be unique. It cannot have a duplicate value, and we're going to have 3 questions, or each question is going to be in here at least 3 times, right? So I'm
Yeah.
just going to pick regular index. This is not an auto increment. The as a primary key is an auto increment, but we're not auto incrementing this, so we don't want to flag that. Then we're going to have our
So
question text. Oh,
I'm sorry, I'm cutting you, but since it's not auto increment, how I say it, I can just go ahead and when I'm like entering in data, I can just go ahead and put 1 for the question ID to tie
yep,
it to question 1. Okay.
exactly. And then, because what would happen is if you did auto increment, it would say, okay, 1, 2, 3, go, wait a second, this option needs to go with question 1, but it's going to force you to go to 2. And that's
Yeah.
where your problem is. Also, I can't remember if it's this version of MySQL or not, but some of the later versions of MySQL will not let you have multiple auto increment keys.
Oh, that's good.
So, well, and they say how many times you need to auto increment in a thing, and it'll throw a SQL error. So, okay, so we have our question text. This is going to be a varchar, and we'll make this 255 again. Once again, that's about 3 lines of text. Or excuse me, it's not question text. This is option text. 255 lines. That's almost 3 lines for an answer. If it's much longer than that, I don't think people are going to read it, so that's good. And then we wanted a time selected type of thing, some sort of counter. And so we can call it counter, which would just be an integer, and we can leave the rest of the stuff there. By default, I'm going to set this value equal to 0.
Okay.
So I just, under default, I said as defined, and it opened up that little box, and I could type in something. That way we know we're starting at a certain count. You can also do a last updated timestamp field if you wanted. That gives you an idea of, okay, when was this question last answered? I don't know if you're interested in that or not.
I was thinking maybe we can do that on the comments. I think that would be better because we're gonna have to display it when that comment is made.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. All right, so right now we have our questions and we have our options. Notice they list them in alphabetical order. That's okay. We need the answers table, right?
Yes.
ANSWERS. And if I come back here,
Oh, then we don't need to count it on the options. We're gonna need it on the answers, right? Because that's the answers they're gonna give.
This
We're
is the
gonna
answers
click
they're going
on.
to give, so we don't need a counter here because they're just going to click and we'll say, okay, this is one vote for this person, one vote for that person. Does that make sense?
But hold on, I didn't get it because like then I'm gonna have to count how many A's in there, how many B's in there for question one.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm gonna have to calculate it from that one. So I
Yep.
don't need. But why do I need to count it in the options then?
Because what you'll do is when they add an answer, you'll update the options, and there's a SQL command called account,
Mm-hmm.
and you can say, okay, count where you say, okay, for everything where there's question one,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to group by what the answer is, so A, B, C, and then we're going to count how many A's, how many B's, how many C's. When we do that count, we now have something we can put into our options and update that.
Okay.
So because the options is how many times was that option selected, we get that answer from the answers table.
Okay.
Okay. So we've got our answers table. We're going to need a primary key for our answer. We're going to need a foreign key that's going to link us back to our options. You're right with that. And then in reality, that's the only thing that we need. If I'm being honest.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Because the option says A, B, or C. So if we have the foreign key going back to the options table,
Then option is already displayed. We don't need to do anything else.
Exactly. So this is going to be real. This is going to be real simple. We're going to do 3 on this one because
Okay.
I am. No, I'm going to do 4. I'm going to show you why I'm going to do 4. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to go. We're going to have the ANSWER. Keep on forgetting to put the W in there. This is a primary and auto increment. We're going to have our option ID. This is going to be our foreign key, so I can come down here to index and select that as an index type of indexing. And that's what I need to know as far as counting that. Now, the big thing I don't want to do is I want to make sure that someone can't say, oh, A, and they select multiple times, right? Okay. So I'm going to put in here like a IP address. And we'll just do that as a varchar. And I'll show you how you can put a value in there using PHP. You can get the client's IP address. That way we can look and say, oh, wait, you've already got an answer here. And it ignores it. Okay.
Oh, so we're gonna like mark it as unique so it cannot enter the system multiple times, right?
So it's not going to be fully unique because as far as the index goes, because we want them to be able to answer multiple questions. We just don't want them to answer the same question multiple times.
Oh, okay.
So that's going to do one thing. The other thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and put when this was answered as well.
Yeah.
So this is just going to be created on, and we'll make this as a timestamp. A timestamp should, we'll do that. So it defaults the current timestamp, and that will ensure that it gets, when it's created, boom, we know that it was created. Here's the timestamp, and here's the person who added that. Okay. Oops, forgot to put my link for my varchar. Oh goodness, how long is an IP6? can't remember how many characters it is. 128 bits. 128 bits is in text. Let's see here. 4, 8, 12, 16. I'll do 32 characters just to be safe. Okay. All right, so we have our question, we have our options for them to pick, and then we have our answers, right?
Yes.
Okay, so there's all three. Those are the three big tables that we'll need to know and we can work with. Now,
How about the comments? Do we need a table for that?
Yes, we'll need a table for that.
Okay.
What I was going to say is in SQL Server or Oracle or some of those type databases, you have what they refer to as a trigger. And you can see this over here with triggers. I have not worked with triggers really before. I'd have to figure out exactly what they do, how to work with them in MySQL. I've used them in SQL Server quite a bit. So remember how we talked about saying, like, when they select an option, we want to go in and add and increment that value to, or when they add an answer, we want to update the options table. Okay, so you can do, we might be able to look at this and say, okay, on table answers, after they insert, and notice you can do insert, update, or delete, but after they insert, you can do okay, well, what was the option that they inserted, and then let's go update the associated option with the answer that they updated. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, and usually you just put some SQL in here so you can say, okay, this is what the value was that changed, and then this is I'm going to write a SQL command, and I can pass variables between my what was updated and stuff like that to go through our process.
So I'm gonna have to do like check the question ID and then check the option ID. Then it's gonna update accordingly.
You should only need to check the option ID.
Okay.
Because the option ID will automatically handle the answer ID, but you're putting the counter on the option. So, like I said, it might be a little difficult to go in and process. I've not done it with MySQL. I've done it with SQL Server. We used to do stuff like that all the time for handling things like this table 1 gets updated, well, it needs to propagate to table 2 and table 3. And sometimes it's simple like a counter. Sometimes it's, oh, we're changing this weird composite key thing, or, your first name changed, and so we need to update the full name field because you changed your first name or you changed your last name, and so we have to update that. And so we used it for a lot of different stuff. In SQL Server, you've got a whole huge T-SQL programming language command set you can use. I've just not done it inside of MySQL, so something that might be worth looking into. Not required, but worth looking into.
I feel like if we can figure it out, it will be a lot easier to update it all the time and pull and calculate it, because then we're gonna have to add 3 options all together, how many people answered for like each question, and divide that by the numbers of each option so we can get the percentage and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, the other option is to do something that happens periodically. So if you notice over here, you have events. And you say, okay, I want to add a new event and I'm going to make this recurring, and it's going to execute every, you have so many minutes. So okay, we'll do minute second. And so you might say like 5 minutes, 0 seconds. Well, what that means is every 5 minutes it could go off and recalculate that for you. So remember I said if you had like a really, like you had thousands of people coming all the time, they're always answering, doing that count and doing that update is time-consuming process. But if you say, hey, I'm just going to do this like every 10 minutes or every 5 minutes or something like that, yeah, you might be off by a couple of counts, but it gives you an accurate enough answer, and it dramatically increases your performance.
Yeah, but like since we are not too big, I would say the trigger would
The
be like
trigger's
more than
probably going to be fine. Yeah,
yeah.
the trigger's probably going to be fine. So just kind of want to give you some other options that are out there that you can
Yeah.
look at. So it's cool that they've started adding this into PHP, or excuse me, into MySQL. When I started with this with MySQL, they didn't have any of that stuff. So this is nice. This is so
Yeah, I think
nice.
it makes it a lot easier, yeah.
Okay, so then we want to have, finally, we were going to have a comment section, right? So
Yeah.
we're going to have comments, and this is going to have the primary key. We're going to relate it back to the question, which is a foreign key, and then we're going to just have a big text area for them to fill in whatever they want, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we just need, we'll have the 3 fields for that, and then we'll do the
Timestamp as well.
yeah, the timestamp. Do you want to do an IP address too?
Should we?
It doesn't hurt.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll do 5 columns. We'll have the comment ID, which is going to be a primary key and auto increment. We're going to have our question ID,
Yeah.
which the index is index. Then we're going to have our comment section, and this we can make text and just, this lets them write a miniature book. Text I think is limited to 32,000 characters. It might be more than that now. It's a,
Then I feel like we should do varchar and just say like 2000.
okay, we can do that. Varchar.
Because I don't want them to like write like a book.
Okay, well, 2,000 characters. If we figure 80 characters per line, approximately, that's what 2,000 divided by 80. I can't do math like that inside my head. 25 lines.
That should be
That's
more than enough.
yeah. I mean that's still pretty significant. So it's like a third of a page or something like that. Okay. Then we're gonna have the IP address.
Okay.
Which we said 32 characters, and then we're going to have the created on timestamp. Timestamp, and default is current timestamp. Okay. And that becomes your 4 tables. Let's double check our document. We have questions, we have options, we have answers, and we have the comments. And you had a couple other things initially, but we're able to put those into the existing tables, and we removed one. So I think that's good. I think that's the 4 tables you're looking for with all the structure and information like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So now the question is, there we have, okay, that's just the comments. I want the whole shebang. Okay, So this is a under the export option. If you're on the database level,
Yeah.
it comes in here and you can export this whole thing out. So this sets your SQL mode, your time zone, stuff like that. Here's your table structure for answers. It says create table if not exist. So i.e. if you already have a table called answers, leave it alone. But if you don't have it, create it. And then it gives you all your information here, then comments, options, and questions. And I can email that to you.
Okay.
And you literally just copy and paste it in. So let's see here. Right here, reply. So every once in a while I have to, these double dashes are comments, and so
Uh-huh.
it should ignore those. Every once in a while something gets in here and I have to clean out some stuff, but usually if I export from PHP MyAdmin, it imports just fine.
Okay.
So that way you can start with what you already have. You can go back and see what we did and make changes. If you need to make changes to a table, like let's say you had answers, you come here to structure on the tab,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can say, oh, I need to add one column, and I can choose at the end of the table, beginning of the table, or after a particular piece. You click go, and you get a chance to create a brand new column that's not there before. You can practice your SQL, so you can say, okay, here's select star from answers. You say go, and it shows you the results. Or you can, I don't need that.
Oh, it says create PHP code. Mm.
So if you create the PHP code, this is what it does for you. It just says, oh, star SQL. So
Oh, never mind.
I mean,
That would be nice.
it's better than nothing, but not a lot.
Yeah.
So, this is designed very simply. It's nice that you can test some stuff out with it, but
But what
you
I was
can't.
thinking is for the comments, especially if I created the insert comment in here, it can convert it to like PHP. Can I use it that way or?
Yeah. So if you said, "Hey, I want to do an insert," okay. So here's the thing: insert into answers. Da, 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 da. If you say, "Oh, it got rid of it," but what you can do is you can take this and copy this into your PHP command.
Okay.
And some things you have to start off like, oh, okay, wait a second. Answer ID, that's a primary key, so I don't need that. I just need the option ID and the IP address and the create on, so I can get rid of this value here, and then I just gotta put in plop 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 my values. You're only going to be working with your project. Almost everything you're going to do is going to be select and insert.
Yeah, that's it for options and comments. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not going to have to worry about
The only thing would be
updates and deletes and stuff like that.
yeah, I'm just gonna have to display back the comments. That's it.
Yeah, that's a select statement.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, select it and what you're going to do, you're going to probably have some select statements on the questions, or so you have a page that says, okay, here's a question, and you're going to say, okay, select star from questions, or yeah, select star from questions where question ID equals 5, and that's your fifth question, and it's going to display those fields that you need, and then you're going to say, okay, display options for where question ID equals 5, and then you go chink 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 and you're going to display those 5 or those 3 questions or whatever they are. And then once that's done and the person selects the thing, you're going to say, okay, insert into answers option ID 83 or option ID 6 or whatever that option ID is, along with things like the IP address and stuff like that.
I see.
So it's, you're, like I said, almost everything you're going to do is going to be your select and your insert. You shouldn't have to worry about things like update or delete or any of those type of commands.
So it's not too complex, actually. I see. Yeah.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Good, because we don't have too much time left. So
Yeah, it's rushing up on you about 6 weeks. So
yeah, I
okay.
just realized it today, so I was like, whoops.
I understand.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
I think that's it. What was the thing you showed it last time with the PHP? That's what I don't remember.
Okay.
Since I'm going to use import and I'll just insert the data in easily, if I have time, I will start working on PHP as well today.
So there's something out there called PHP Pdl. And if you do a search for PHP Pdl, you can find it under the PHP manual. And they have some other things that you can do. And if you get stuck with something, you can take a look at it. So I've not seen this particular one, but you can so you say something like, okay, MySQL :host equals localhost or 1.27.0.0.1. That's fine. Your database name and then your character set. And then when you create your PDO, you say PDO, new PDO. You put your DSN, your username, your password, and then the options. You shouldn't have to worry about your options. That should be basically blank for what we're doing. Once you do that, then you do things like you're going to create a statement, and the way you do that is say, okay, PDO query, and then you can put in your SQL statement. What's nice about this is if you use a prepared statement, and they talk about right here, prepared statements is where you have things like this, like a question mark, and you can do generic statements or you can do named. I prefer named. It just makes it easier to deal with them. So a named placeholder protects you from what they call a SQL injection attack. So your SQL injection attack, it used to be you define your SQL like this, and you would just put in, okay, and here's an email address. Well, someone could say, my email address is semicolon, which ends a SQL command, and then say something like drop table users. Well, that would be a real problem. And so, because you don't want your user table dropped, obviously, where when you do a prepared statement, it's doing all the checks for that type of stuff for you. So you don't have to worry about it. Once you have a statement that's prepared, you just execute it. And you can put in your this is the way I usually do it because I do the name statements. So email is going to be attached to this command. This is one way to do it. There's another way you can do it as well. I can show you that way if you prefer. And when that executes, then you can say, okay, let me go fetch this information back. You can use your fetch, which gets the next or the next element in the what gets returned, or you can say fetch all, and that gets put into like a huge associative array. So kind of just depends upon how you're wanting to do things. I can show you some of that stuff as you go through. But this actually, I haven't seen this one before, but this actually looks like a pretty good little tutorial to kind of walk you through.
So
that
like
step.
the stuff you are showing so far is for like the email and password and stuff like that. Am I understanding right? Or it's just for the regular statements as well?
So yeah, any type of SQL statement that you have, this works for.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to use this PDL.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Using PDO is strongly recommended. The old commands, and there was something called MySQL query, and they talk about it right up here. This has been deprecated, if I remember correctly, in the current version of PHP. So it will still work, but they're saying it's not going to work in the next version of PHP. I think it's what is PHP 8. I don't know what the deadline is on that to come out, but they're saying like, okay, this works, and we're putting this in here so it still works for backwards compatibility, so you have a chance to fix this, but this is not a smart way of doing it. You really need to fix this. And it's mainly because it's just unsafe. It allows you to have a lot of injection issues and stuff like that. Using PDO is, I believe, a little bit slower, but it's much safer. And you don't want to have people, hacking stuff. So this is a good way to kind of fix some of that. Okay.
And also when it defines like the email, instead of that, I'm gonna have like a question ID 5 or something, right? Okay.
Yeah. So, like I said, if you start working on this and you get in some questions and you start going, wait a second, what happened here? Feel free to ask questions. I'll be more than happy to help you with that.
Okay, I'm just gonna work on like creating like the database and inserting everything and make sure it looks good.
Okay.
Then I will just start working on the PHP.
Yeah.
So, where am I gonna code the PHP? Is it gonna be on the Notepad++ as well, or is there
Yeah,
any?
that would be fine to do. PHP is a text-based file, so you can do Notepad++. There are some PHP editors out there. I've not found one that I really like more than others. So I've just used Notepad++ or Dreamweaver, because I have Dreamweaver I do for some other stuff, and it supports it, but Notepad++ works.
Okay.
If you want to insert something directly in and you don't want to worry about, creating like an insert form for adding like your questions and stuff like that, notice I got my questions here. If you go to insert,
Yeah, that's what I was
yeah,
planning to do. I
okay,
feel like that will be easier so I can follow
yes,
like.
yeah. I just want to make sure you were aware of that when you said insert. I just want to make sure you were aware that you had this as an option. If you leave something blank, like if you leave question ID blank, because it's an auto increment, you don't have to put something there. It's just going to do it. Your function is, you've got some built-in functions to MySQL. And if you needed something like that, you can do it. I don't think you're going to need any functions. The biggest one that I see sometimes is like they'll use like a password, or they have a DES, encrypt and decrypt, for passwords and stuff like that, or MD5. You're not worrying about that at this point, so I wouldn't worry about that.
Just for the timestamp, I just saw it.
Yeah, timestamp is in there if you need to put it, or because of how we set it up, it gets a default value. So if you, let's see here, I think options had, no, options doesn't even have it. So it's only your, is it comments that has it?
I think comments has
Yeah,
it.
but you notice here, it put in the current timestamp for you.
Okay.
So you don't have to worry about it. It knows what it is. It goes, oh, here you go.
Okay, so when it does the current timestamp, it's gonna be like the date and time, or
Yeah, a timestamp is, internally, I think it stores it as like number of seconds from January 1st, 1970. I think it uses the same one as Unix. I'm not positive on that. But it displays as the date with the hour, minute, second, and I think it goes to millisecond. So it's your timestamp is almost guaranteed to be unique between two records, because it's down to the milliseconds. You could technically have two timestamps with the same value. Two things got inserted at the exact same millisecond, but it's pretty accurate. So you shouldn't have to worry about that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, good luck. If you like I said, if you have questions, just let me know. And
Okay.
oh, Kate joined us. So, hello, Kate. I'm going to